We're live. Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know if Kickstarter is launching this week. If you're a new subscriber, congratulations because you might have just helped us reach a brand new milestone, 5,000 subs. I knew we'd do it. And for those of you that haven't subscribed, well, we're all welcome here. I said I'd do it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it now. Yeah. And also make sure to go ahead and subscribe to Alex Radcliffe over at Board Game Co. And I'm recommending this out of my own volition. I do these videos weekly covering the next 7 days, but if you want to see further into the future, Alex releases a video at the end of every month going over the next 30 days. And he'll give you a really great idea of the games to come. He also offers a ton of other content ranging from reviews, previews to top 10s to detailed breakdowns of active campaigns, digging into the value proposition to help you decide which campaigns are right for you.
And I'm a duck.
Yeah, I did it, alright? I'm not saying...
First impressions
Alright. Yeah, he's also very charismatic, good looking, smart, and I'll leave a link to his channel right up here. But with all that out of the way, let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first campaign we have launches on November 1st, and it's called Totems and Taboos. And this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this game takes a tongue-in-cheek approach on religion, where players are going to be trying to form their own religion and build a totem pole in honor of their values. And players are going to be building their totems from different colored dice, and the first player to reach the 6th level of their totem pole wins the game. To build each level of their totem, players are going to need human souls. I mean devout believers. Souls are represented with these black soul cubes that you can see in the middle of the image here, and they come in 3 different shapes. There's the servant, the cleric, and the shrine. And each of those is going to help you gain more souls, and you're going to need different combinations of them in order to build each level of your totem. The first level of your totem is free, and you might have noticed that each die comes in 1 of 6 different colors. And that's important because each color is going to represent a different value or principle of your religion, and it's also going to determine your starting resources and your turn order. There's also a deck of cards for each color, and depending on the die that you started with, you're going to draw 3 cards at the start of the game, matching the color of your first die in your totem pole. Each card will have a special action or ability that can help or harm players along the way, and it will usually require spending different souls in order to activate that card. Some cards also have an additional bonus ability that will get activated if you have a specific colored die already in your totem pole. You might have noticed that the different colored decks are also placed out in a circle around the play area, and that's important to note because you can only place a die on your totem that matches the color of your last totem or the color that is adjacent to that color in the circle. And on a player's turn, there's a few different actions that they can perform. They can either choose to play as many cards as they like, and then they can draw a new card into their hand at the end of their turn. Or they can instead choose to discard all of their cards, and whether you played all your cards or if you discarded them all, if you end up with no cards in your hand at the end of your turn, you draw back up to 3. So it's always efficient to try and play all of your cards. Alternatively, players can choose to skip their turn, and if they do that, they can gain a Servant Soul Cube, which is the lowest level, or they can upgrade a Soul Cube to the next level. If a player chooses to play their cards and is able to play 3 cards of the same type in a single turn, then they're going to also gain this Cleric card that you can see adjacent to the deck of cards here. And that's going to grant an ongoing special ability as long as you have it in your possession, but it can also be sacrificed for a powerful one-time effect. At that point, the card gets returned beside the deck of cards that you took it from, which makes it available for other players to try and add it to their hand. This looks like a really fun little game here with some really nice components, so if it interests you, I have the link to this campaign page in the description below. Also launching on November 1st is Power62 DELTA, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a game that iterates on the game of chess. The designers started with chess as the foundation of their design and then iterated on it and gave it a sci-fi theme to turn it into something completely different. This is actually a campaign that I did cover a few weeks back, so I actually already do have some footage on this one, and I'll leave a link to that right up here. Launching on November 1st, we have Patria Libre, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a game that focuses on the independence of Mexico, and players are going to be playing over 3 different eras, and they're going to play as one of 2 main factions, either the insurgents who want to separate from Spain, or the royalists who want to prevent that from happening. There's also a third military faction, and this type of unit can actually alternate between the 2 different sides. The players are going to be using a really neat action selection mechanism to try and get the upper hand against their opponent and win the game. Players are going to be using those actions to try and gain victory points, but also try to gain control over different regions of the map. And in order to perform those actions, they're going to be using double-sided order tokens, and those are going to be reused throughout the game. And the double-sided aspect of these order tokens is what makes the action selection so interesting in this game, because once you have them out in front of you, you can't flip them unless you want to use up an entire turn in order to flip some of your action tokens to the other side. So you're going to really want to make sure that the actions you want to use are the ones that you have face up at the start of your round. Players are going to be putting these order tokens out onto the board to perform different actions, but then they're going to be retrieving them at the end of the round to use them again in the following round. And some of the different actions that these order tokens provide are to deploy or move your infantry, build fortifications, gain coins, attack opponents in the same region, or gain popularity. And popularity is a really interesting resource because you'll be spending it throughout the game to move your popularity tokens up and down 3 different tracks in order to upgrade your abilities throughout the game in 3 different areas. Players can also purchase these circular cards here that you can see at the bottom of the screen, and those are going to allow players to change what their order token does when they deploy it out on the board. And the action of that card is used in place of whatever ability is on the token itself. So if you ever end up with an order token that you don't really want to use, you can change its action by applying one of these cards when you go to deploy it. And players can perform one action on their turn. They can either choose to activate an order token by putting it out on the board, or they can activate a card with the order token like I had just mentioned, or instead they can recover their deployed order tokens that are already placed out on the map. And of course, the last action they can perform is to flip any of their order tokens by placing the action that they want to use face up. As players progress through the 3 different eras, they're also going to be revealing event cards that relate to those different eras, and these are going to cause some game-changing effects for the players to contend with, but they can also reward VP to any players that are able to meet certain requirements of those cards during that round. And the game can be played in 4 different modes of play. You can either play 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2, or you can play a 3-player mode where 1 player is playing as that military faction, or you could play solo. The game also has a few different win conditions. You can either be the first to reach 30 victory points, or be 10 points ahead of all other players, or control at least 3 of the different provinces. And if neither of these are reached by the time that the final event card is revealed, then the player with the most victory points wins the game. Also launching on November 1st, we have Karigar-E-Taj, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a light to medium worker and tile placement game where players are going to be playing as artisans, using their skills to build the Taj Mahal. And players will be putting their workers out into this ever-changing market in order to gather the goods and resources that they need in order to build the different levels of the Taj Mahal. And the market's always changing because these action tiles will be changing throughout the game, offering you some different abilities at the different points that you're putting your workers out onto the board. Using these actions and resources, players will earn different tiles in order to build the different levels of the Taj Mahal, and they'll be putting those tiles out onto the board, covering up the area of the Taj Mahal that they were able to build. This earns you gifts from the Emperor, which are worth victory points at the end of the game, and the game ends when the last of the 12 tiles are placed out onto the Taj Mahal, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And this next campaign launching on November 1st is not for a board game, but for a component that can help you spruce up your board game nights. And this component is just a simple 2-inch metal coin that can spin on either side, but it can be used for a bunch of different situations, mainly for dice rolling. And although I have seen ideas like this in the past, I think that this is the best design and implementation that I've seen so far. They've managed to fit quite a lot onto this coin, which makes it really useful in a lot of different situations, but it's still very intuitive and distinguishable. And as someone who is a UI designer, I can really appreciate the work that they've put into this, because it's not easy to put so much onto a coin without making it feel cluttered or hard to read. And the way that they managed to accomplish this is through some clever use of colors, characters, and sizing. On the one side of the coin, you have the larger print, which represents the D6, and then you have some smaller print, which represents a D12. So if you ever need to roll a D6 or D12, you just flip this coin to the red side and then spin it and stop with your finger. And then you look at the next number that shows up beside your finger of that type, and that's the number that you rolled. Then we have the other side of the coin, which you can identify with its blue theme, and it has a D4 if you're looking only at the metallic text, and then you're going to include the black text if you want to roll a D8. And then around the edge of the coin, you have your D10 and your D20, and your D10 is going to be using this embossed text, while your D20 is going to be using this engraved text. Another neat feature is that this also has the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. And you may not have noticed on the other side, but it also has the different suits of cards. And if you want to see the coin in action, this video shows you exactly how you can use it and how you can get the different results depending on the die that you want to roll. They also have this handy chart here that highlights all the different die options, and if you want to take a look at that, feel free to pause the video now. With all these different options on the coin, it doesn't just work as a die replacement. With a little bit of creativity, you can use it as a stat tracker to track any of your stats, such as your health, or you could also use it as a timer. Whenever you spin this, it spins from 1 to 2 minutes, which is actually a really interesting concept because this will essentially act as a variable timer, which is something that you don't really get with the sand timer. The coin also has a few different holes around the edges, so you can go ahead and turn it into a necklace, or you could put it on display with this stand that will also be offered in the campaign. If this one sounds interesting to you, definitely click to get notified because there will be some limited pledges with different shipment dates. And if you're early enough, you can get this as soon as December of this year. And I have the link to the campaign in the description below. And now for campaigns launching on November 2nd, we have Jiangnan, Life of Gentry. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a game that can be played as a single scenario, but it can also be played through multiple scenarios as a campaign. And players are going to be playing as different artisans using worker placement and action tile bag building to complete their crafts. Players will be competing to use actions out on the main board, but they'll also be using their individual studio boards to produce and release works of literature, calligraphy, painting, music, and the performing arts. The main board offers a few different action locations that will all behave a little bit differently, and players can also use their actions to visit existing masters of the arts to gain inspiration, or even earn enough favor with those masters to hire them to their studio. Hiring these different artists will allow you to meet the deadlines of your regularly released new works, as long as you are able to continue paying them. The player that does all this the best and turns their works of art into remembered classics wins the game. Also launching on November 2nd, we have the Elder Scrolls Skyrim board game, and this plays 1 to 4 players, and this is a story-driven campaign game, so it's going to be a ton of hours to play, but I'm sure each session will be around 1 to 2 hours. And this is a cooperative game, so if you've ever wanted to play Skyrim cooperatively, like I've always wanted to, this might be a good campaign for you. But in this game, players are going to be exploring Skyrim and facing off against its various threats, and players are going to have to work together to keep the land safe while discovering and fulfilling requirements of different quests. This game is going to offer a completely different storyline than the video game, so if you're worried about playing the same old, that's not going to be the case. This is going to be something completely new. The base game is going to be divided into 2 separate campaigns of 3 chapters each, and the decisions that you have throughout the campaign are going to have a distinct effect on the story that's going to unfold as you move forward, and it's also going to change the types of encounters that are available to you. There's also a wide variety of characters that you can play as well as a ton of different gear, magical spells, and skills that you can use to upgrade and customize your character, and all these different variables are just going to make the whole campaign experience very different every time you play. Another neat aspect of this game is you can actually swap between different characters in between play sessions, so if you want to play your next game a little bit different or open up some different choices, this will allow you to experience the game just a little bit differently. This game is designed with a fail-forward mindset, so there's not really any losing in the game, but you do have worse or better outcomes depending on how you perform. I really like this design because it just allows you to continually move forward, and it gives you a lot more immersion as the decisions and failures and successes are all going to play into the story as you move forward. And if you're not a huge fan of that and you like to try and get everything right, the game does allow you to just drop in and play different adventures as one-offs, and you could potentially use that just to reset back to a different chapter and then play it as a one-off, but then continue from there if you are happy with your performance. And each turn, players are going to draw an event card, which is going to present some different challenges or opportunities to the players, and then each player can move up to 4 spaces on the board. After that, each player can take an action, and these can be different things like exploring a dungeon, often together as a group, meeting some interesting NPCs, fighting roaming monsters, completing quests, or exploring an area of the world. So if you're in a safer area like a city or stronghold, you can go ahead and explore that area, but also buy, sell, and upgrade your equipment there. But if you're out in the far reaches of Skyrim, you can explore the different tomes, dungeons, and try to complete different chains of quest cards. All quests come in the form of a card, and they have a challenge for you to complete, as well as a reward if you're able to complete it successfully. They also have a penalty if you can't complete it, and oftentimes a choice that will lead to another quest card. On the way, players will run into different enemies that they can defeat for different treasure and experience points, which they can then use to upgrade different stats like different combat arts, or different skills like my personal favorite, pickpocketing. And of course, upgrading these different skills will help you with different skill checks throughout the game. And this one was kind of sort of our Discord pick of the week if you ignore all these savage NGs. Link to the campaign in the description below if you want to know more. Also launching on November 2nd, we have Monsterpocalypse the board game, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a re-implementation of the game with the same name. And this is a combat miniatures game where players are commanding monsters out to destroy all their opponent monsters out in the field. Players will be fighting through streets and buildings of a big city, and monsters can actually increase their power throughout the game by smashing buildings and destroying enemy units. Monsters and units also have weapons and abilities that are activated using special dice, and they can throw each other across the city, rampage through buildings, and suplex each other into radioactive rubble. This new box is going to be 100% compatible with all the existing content and plays exactly the same way, but requires no assembly of the miniatures. And it aims to give the same feeling as the original game while making it more accessible for people to just pick up and play. The core box is going to offer 8 classic Monsterpocalypse miniatures for up to 2 players to play, and there's also going to be a multiplayer expansion that allows co-op and competitive play for up to 4 players. Then there's going to be a ton of different add-ons for different monsters, units, and buildings for players to expand on their collection. Also on November 2nd, we have Selsia, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 minutes per player to play. And this is a game where players are starship captains in the Selsia solar system, and they're going to be commanding their asymmetric ships, each with their own special ability, competing to earn the most reputation in the solar system. And it's going to be up to each individual player to decide if they want that to be a good reputation or a bad one. And players are going to be doing this by completing different jobs and quests that gradually get harder the more that they complete. And in order to make those harder ones more attainable, players are also going to be upgrading their ship and crew to increase their attack and defense power, as well as upgrade their engine and battery power and their cargo space. The main mechanisms are action selection, area control, pickup and deliver, dice rolling, and rondel movement. Each turn, players are going to move their ship and perform an action. The board's broken up into 3 different sections. Visiting the innermost planets allows players to gather resources and hire crew members, but it also has the risk of space pirates. And then there are the outer planets where players can visit to find different job cards, and these jobs can be different things like bounty contracts or cargo delivery. And then there are the outsider planets, and these are going to provide stronger actions to the player, but these spaces will need to be unlocked by players throughout the game whenever they upgrade their spaceships. The most reputable player at the end of the game wins the game. Also on November 2nd, we have Titania Ascending, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative flip and write game that plays over 2 phases. Players are each going to have their own map that has an inner area with a lighter color that they're going to be using in the first phase, and then they're going to be using the entire map in the second phase. Similar to cartographers, there's going to be a few cards that are flipped up with a few different icons, but then there's also going to be these tiles that are flipped up underneath each card. And what these tiles do is they allow you to swap out an icon for one of the icons on the card. The active player will choose one of these cards, and then all players will have to draw it onto their map. You can flip it, rotate it, and mirror it however you like, and then you're going to be trying to cover some of these different citadel icons on the map, which are identified with a crown. Whatever icon you cover that citadel with, you're going to note it down below for use in the second phase. Players will have to fill in 6 of these to move on to the second round, and if they're unable to do that, then they lose the game. But that's not the only objective in this round, because if you're able to fill in a full column or row, you'll gain some additional resources, which can be traded in for some special abilities. The second phase does have some similarities to the first, where you're going to be flipping up 3 cards and 3 tiles, but the cards are going to behave a little bit differently. Each card is going to have a rule on the top as well as a pattern underneath it. The active player is going to choose one of these cards that they think they can complete, and then they're going to have to meet both requirements of the card. So that means that they're going to have to draw this pattern onto their map while also meeting the rule requirements, which can be different things like having a certain number of icons covered by the pattern, or that they don't cover certain items with the pattern. And there are a lot of different rules in this game that make each card play a little bit differently. When the active player is able to do this, they'll be able to choose an icon from the associated tile and then match it with one of the icons that they gathered during the previous phase and then mark that icon as complete on their player sheet. Although the active player has to fulfill both requirements of the card, every other player just has to fill in the different spaces matching the pattern until it's their turn, and then they choose a card, and these turns continue until the game ends. If at any point during the two phases players are unable to gather or complete those icons, they lose the game. And launching on November 2nd, we have Elementile, and this plays 2 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a really neat design that mixes a head-to-head combat card game with a spatial strategy element. Players are going to be advancing their cards through a 4x4 grid in order to try and reach the end where they can damage their opponent and try and reduce their opponent's health down to 0. On your way, you also run into your opponent's cards that are trying to make their way over to damage you. These cards out on the board can also do battle with each other, just like in any combat card game. But with the spatial element layered on top of this, it does add some interesting dynamics into the mix. And the game offers 2 different ways that you can start. Players can choose to either draft their starting decks or to construct their starting decks. And players will draw a hand of cards each turn, and players can choose to discard any number of their cards in order to trade those for elemental cards. And players will spend these element cards to summon new units into play, and if you already have units in play, then you can summon them into the same row as your existing units, or into the space behind an existing unit. If you don't have any units already in play, then you just summon in the starting row that's closest to you. There's 6 different types of elements in this game: wind, earth, water, fire, light, and darkness, and each has its own key themes that it's strong at. One might be great at healing and shielding, while another might focus on movement and attack buffs. And if there's element cards that you didn't use by the end of your turn, then they become wild cards and you can use them for any element activation in a future turn. Players can then activate their units one by one, moving a unit one space and attacking any units within range. The interesting thing about how the spatial element comes into play here is that certain units can only attack in certain directions relative to themselves, and they might do more damage in one direction than they would in another. So it'll really give you some interesting decisions to make as you're moving your units across the board. So a fun aspect of this combat card game is that defeating the other player's units does help you, but it's not the way to win the game. You actually need to get your units across to the other side of the board where you can inflict damage on your opponent player. So in a way, players are actually part of the game in this, and each player has 10 health, and if you're reduced to 0, then you lose the game. And there's 3 types of cards in the game. First, there's the units, which are the main cards that we've been talking about and get deployed out on the board. And then there's heroes, which are stronger versions of the units. And then there's the 3rd type of card that is the most different, and these are the spell cards. And these offer single-use abilities or ongoing effects that players can take advantage of throughout the game. Some really neat ideas here, and I really like the whole look of the game out on the table. If you do like combat card games, I definitely recommend checking this one out. It looks like it is offering quite a few new ideas and is delivering something very different from other games that you might have played. It's one that I'm definitely impressed by, and if it's done right, I think it shows a lot of potential. Launching on November 2nd, we have Trinity of Reign, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is an area control game where players are each rulers of one of 4 clans, and players are going to be trying to build out their empire and expand across the map to try and claim dominance through one of 3 different win conditions. Players can either win through wealth by building up their fortune and then using that to complete their city hall, which is represented by this really neat miniature, where you're going to be adding bits and pieces to it as you purchase upgrades and new buildings to complete the entire miniature. Or you can win by honoring the gods by collecting different ingredients in the different regions of the map and then using those ingredients with your druids to complete different potions. These potions will grant you strong abilities while simultaneously proving your loyalty to your gods, and if you're able to complete the final potion, then you would win the game. And then finally, you can win through your military by conquering new lands from your opponents and then defending the ones you have. And if you're able to conquer enough of the land, then you have won the game. Players are going to start the game with 3 provinces, a town, and some units, and the game's played over 9 rounds that each have 4 phases each. The first phase is the income phase, and this is where players can earn coin depending on the number of towns and castles that they've built. But then they can also earn resources based on the number of provinces that they control that also happen to have a mine. And the second phase is the Druid action phase, and this is where every Druid for every player will be able to perform one action, and Druids can essentially perform one of two actions. They can either gather ingredients, or they can prepare potions with those ingredients. And potions can be used later in the game to perform some special abilities. The third phase is the purchase phase, and this is where players can purchase different buildings and units behind their player screen, and this is all done simultaneously. And then finally, the fourth phase is the place, move, and fight phase, and this is where players can place their purchase units and buildings into their provinces, but then they can also move their units across the board. And if units end up in opposing players' provinces, that's going to trigger a battle, and players will be using dice rolling to engage in combat, and players will get a die for each unit and fortification that they have in that province. The game continues like this until one of the 3 win conditions is met by one of the players, and the player who does that wins the game. Also on November 2nd, we have Yashima and Ninja Dice. These are 2 separate games being offered in a single campaign, and I'll go over Yashima first. And Yashima is a game for 2 to 4 players that takes about 90 minutes to play. And this is a card-driven combat miniatures game where players are going to be choosing different characters and then customizing them to engage in player versus player or team versus team battle. Each character's attack deck also doubles as their health, and defeated players do not get eliminated in this game, instead they get restored, but the last player standing who has not used their restoration wins the game. And what's new in this game is that they've rewritten the rules to streamline the gameplay, and they've also made each box a 2-player standalone game, but then the different boxes can be combined to add more characters and more player count to your game sessions. And the other game included in this campaign is called Ninja Dice, and this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 30 minutes to play. And in this game, players will be rolling a collection of dice in order to determine the challenges that players will go up against. The different challenge dice will have guards, residents, and locks, and players will have to roll another set of dice to try and defeat those through fighting, stealth, and lockpicking. Other icons can be used to boost certain dice on the table depending on their locations, and players will be trying to achieve certain rolls to defeat these challenges. The active player can choose to re-roll the dice however many times they do, but every time they do, they have the added threat of the other players, because the other players can now roll a threat dice, allowing them to shoot the other player and each other, potentially stealing victory points. The game proceeds for 3 rounds with increasing difficulty, and the highest scoring player wins the game. And this new version of the game is going to allow you to play as one of 5 unique characters with their own character card and unique set of dice. And if you back in the first 48 hours, you'll also get this ninja pin added to your pledge completely for free. And now for November 3rd, we have Infinity Deathmatch Tag Raid, and this is a survival skirmish miniatures war game. And tag in this game actually stands for Tactical Armored Gear, because players will be fighting against these massive mega beasts in this robot armor. The game uses a combat system that's been around for many years, and it's going to incorporate line of sight, turn order, and players will be fighting against each other, having 2 actions per turn. But the first action must always be a movement action. After each action on a player's turn, all other players get to respond, and battles will begin with only the players on the board along with their combat suits. But at some point in the game, an AI-controlled megabeast will emerge and wreak havoc on the players. The game has 3 different endgame conditions, either when the megabeast is killed, the event deck runs out, or if a player is able to collect all of the Neo material items scattered on the board. And the player that either completed that endgame condition or did the best, depending on which endgame condition was triggered, would win the game. Also on November 3rd, we have Float from the Deep, and in this game, players are one of the many survivors of a crashed cruise ship. And players have been lucky enough to land on a remote island where they have been split with other survivors into 5 different groups. Players are going to be choosing a character and their unique ability to lead one of these groups, and then compete for survival as they try to make their way back to solid land. Players will be performing different actions to gather water and items, as well as managing their rations as they attempt to survive monsters, nature, and each other for 7 days. Battles are resolved using dice rolling, and players that are able to make it back to solid land win the game. This seems like a fairly simple game, but I do know it's been in development for quite some time, and it's one that I've been keeping an eye on, because for whatever reason, I just love survival games, and if you do too, make sure to click that notify me button to get notified on launch. And now on November 4th, we have Wild Realms, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 50 to 70 minutes to play. And in this game, humans have all gone extinct, and nature has reclaimed the world. This is a competitive card game where players will be drawing 5 cards into their hand and then using them to build up their kingdom across 4 different realms of air, land, water, and fire. I don't have too much info on how the game actually plays for this one, but I know players will be playing realm cards and then trying to lock each of those 4 realms in order to win the game. Players will be releasing different animals into the play area and fighting them against each other to defend and attack each other's realms, trying to prevent the other players from locking in the different realms before you do. This one is launching on GameFound, and if you follow the campaign page now, you'll get a free pack that adds 10 new legendary beast cards to your game. So if this one sounds interesting to you at all and you want to learn more of it, definitely follow along with the campaign page because it'll lock this extra reward in, and it'll also have a lot more information than what I'm giving you right now. And launching on November 5th, we have Age of Galaxy, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And if you like big 4X games, you'll probably want to hear about this one. And if you hate giant 4X games, you'll definitely want to hear about this one. This game is offering a very interesting package because it fits an entire galactic civilization game that combines 4X and Euro elements into a very small travel-sized box. Not only that, but this game also has some really cool ideas going for it. Rather than playing as a single faction or civilization, a single player can actually play as an alliance of 3 civilizations. So that's going to create a ton of different permutations and unique combos by combining their different strengths and special abilities. As I've been researching this game, it really seems like all the design choices are really going to give you that feel of a big 4X game, but then deliver it in a really tight and streamlined package that is not too overwhelming with components or rules or long play times. So I think this is presenting a really excellent option for people that want to have that 4X experience, but at a very low barrier to entry. And from what I've seen from actually digging into the rules, it seems like this is going to do a really great job of it. So if you love 4X games and want more excuses to play them more frequently, I think this is a great option. But if 4X games have turned you off in the past, whether it's because they're too intimidating or they just don't seem like they're worth all that effort, I definitely recommend looking into this one because this is your chance to have that experience, but in a very welcoming and accessible package. And for that reason, this one is my pick of the week. I also really love how the map is laid out in this game. Rather than having a huge sprawling map of hexes, this game actually uses a set of cards, and you're only going to be using a subset of cards each game, so there's going to be a little bit of randomness and variability from game to game. But then each card also has a number of icons where you're going to be randomly assigning different planets. So another great design choice where you're getting random cards, but then you're also randomly placing the planets out on those cards, adding to the variability in the map setup in a very streamlined fashion. And the way that players choose the 3 factions that they want to form into their alliance is that they'll be drafting 7 faction cards at the start of the game, and these faction cards are multi-use, so the 3 will become your main factions that you'll be forming your alliance with, and then the remaining 4 cards will still be used, but for their secondary actions as support cards. The game plays over 5 rounds, and each round has 4 phases. The first phase is the production phase, where players will gain money based on the empire that they've built throughout the galaxy. The next phase is the action phase, where players will take turns performing different actions, both on a central board as well as on their personal tech tree boards. And the different actions they can perform is to explore and colonize different areas of space, develop and research tech, defenses, and starship upgrades, and trade and gain influence in the Galactic Senate, as well as retrieve or scavenge resources throughout the galaxy. After the action phase, there's the war phase, where players will simply gain rewards for having more cruisers than the other players. But if a single player has the most cruisers, then they can also attack other players' planets within their reach and potentially take them away from the other players. These planets won't necessarily grant you victory points if they're not in line with your factions, but they will help you remove victory points from the other players. And the final phase is the galactic phase, where players will reveal the next galaxy card and add the random planets, and then initiate the next round. The game starts with only 2 visible galaxy cards, and more will be revealed as the game progresses. And I also want to mention that this game has a ton of reviews and comments over on Board Game Geek, so I definitely recommend going and checking that out if you want to see for yourself what people have to say from people that have actually played the game. The amount of reviews I'm seeing here is really impressive for a game that hasn't been released on Kickstarter yet, so it really gives me confidence that the designers are doing everything that they can to playtest this and make it the best game that they possibly can. This is one of those games that was completely off my radar, but after seeing all this, I am super excited for it. Highly recommend checking this one out, and if it interests you, don't forget you can click to get notified, and links to all these campaigns are in the description below. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and the first one is for the City of the Great Machine. And this is a one versus many game where players will be playing either as the City of the Great Machine, which is an AI-controlled city, or they'll be playing as a faction of humans trying to fight back and start a revolution. Each side will be earning different types of currencies that they can use to perform different various actions on their turns. Whoever is playing as the Great Machine will be able to control different aspects of the city as well as the robot guards that are stationed there. This player will also be trying to advance their master plan track on this dial, and if they are able to max that out, then they win the game. The players playing as the humans will be trying to enlist supporters and use their unique abilities to encourage discontent in the city. And the city's discontent will also be tracked on the same dial used as the master plan track. If the human players are able to complete 3 riots before the master plan track reaches the end, then they win the game. And this is an awesome giveaway provided by the publisher because this is for the Master of the City all-in pledge. And this is going to come with a ton of content, the core game, all stretch goals, and all expansions. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag AI and let us know what your strategy would be for taking out an artificial intelligence life form. If I learned anything from Star Trek, a good paradox should work, so I just walk up to it and tell it that this statement is a lie. Big brain here. And the next giveaway we have is for Kinghill, and this is a unique take on a 2-player card battler that integrates worker placement with upgradable worker tokens. The game features some really amazing artwork both on the board and the individual cards, as players are going to be competing for dominance by deploying their units and casting different spells. Players will be gathering different resources, promoting their workers into different specialties, building structures for boosts in passive abilities, and hiring units with different strengths, defenses, and abilities. Players will also be able to perform some really powerful moonstone spells that power up throughout the game, and when those are unleashed, they can have some devastating effects on the environment as a whole. Take advantage of your units and spells while constantly adapting to the changing landscape caused by the moonstone powers to outwit your opponent and win the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the King of the Hill pledge, which comes with the core game and all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, I want you to do something a little bit different. In my last video, I mentioned the Extra Life campaign that's being run by the One Stop Co-op Shop team, and I think they're doing some amazing work over there. This is a campaign that I donated to, and you can see that in my previous video. I recorded it all. And I think it's a really great cause and something worth supporting. So in order to enter this giveaway, all I want you to do is head over to that video. I'll leave a link to it right up here. And just leave any comment on the video that you want. You don't have to donate to the fundraiser to get entered into this giveaway, but if you do have the time, definitely take a look at their video if you can. And 100% of the proceeds raised for this fundraiser are going to be donated to the charity. And if you're not able to donate, maybe just consider liking and sharing the video, because any activity on the video will help YouTube algorithms share it to more people, which will help get more attention for this campaign. And if you are able to donate, I think it's a really nice thing to do. And the next giveaway is for Final Challenge, and this is a social party game where players are going to be completing different challenges on their turn, almost like little dares, and players will be trying to complete one of each type in order to complete their final challenge. And the way that that works is that each type of card comes in a different color, and then on the back of each card is a word that when you complete all the colors, you'll be able to piece those words together and interpret it however you want to try and decide what your final challenge will be. So it's a really neat full circle where you're completing the challenges, and then those challenges all have individual words that then piece together to form your final challenge that you have to complete to win the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the full game pledge, which comes with the core game plus 2 expansions and all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, instead of leaving a comment on the video, just head over to our Discord. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And all you have to do is click this little emoji under the giveaways channel, and that'll get you automatically entered into this giveaway, which will get drawn at the end of the week. And make sure you have your notifications turned on, or that you check back later to see if you won. And the last giveaway we have is for Beasts of Gévaudan, and this is a print and play over on Game on Tabletop. And in this game, players are taking on the role of different hunters, and they're going to be facing against many beasts throughout the game, and then at the very end of the game facing against the final beast. The beast is randomly generated from a series of attributes that are put into 4 different envelopes at the start of the game. And then players are going to be trying to influence the public to believe that the beast is of a certain nature depending on their character's ideology. All the while players are trying to build up their hunting party through worker placement and trying to investigate the true nature of the beast so that they're the most prepared when they enter into that final battle. There are a variety of ways to earn victory points, but the player with the most at the end of the game wins the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the patron of the Hunt Pledge, which also comes with Tabletop Simulator access for this game. And just like with the last one, head over to the Discord and all you have to do is click that emoji to get entered in this giveaway. And that is everything I have for you this week. Until next time, make sure to have yourself a happy and safe Halloween. And remember, respect your shelf.